My name is Rick Jones. I'm the Butler County Sheriff, Butler County, Ohio. I just came back from the National Sheriff's Training in D.C. 2 days ago. We were briefed by the FBI Director, Ray, the Director of the FBI, and several federal agencies. There's 3,300 sheriffs in the United States. The President of the United States refuses to meet with the sheriffs of the 3,300. We have a hierarchy. We have a president. We have a vice president. The President of the United States refuses to meet with the sheriffs. He also refuses to meet with the police chiefs of the United States. They have a hierarchy also. He refuses to meet with them to talk about border issues or to talk about crime that's going on because of the border issue. We were also told by Mr. Ray, the FBI Director, that there are more red flags going off now than before 9/11. Okay? When I say red flags, meaning people that are here in this country that are wanting to do harm to us.
And we're back, and we have got a star-studded panel once again today. Jeff Emde, aka 007, former CIA operative; Keith Graves, former SWAT team leader and trainer, drug interdiction specialist, and the host of Christian Warrior Training; our in-house mad bomber, Mike Sterling, who loves blowing shit up just for the fun of it. Has all 10 fingers, by the way, in case y'all didn't notice. And we have a new panelist today. Jay, welcome to the channel. Jay's a former U.S. Marine Corps and has a significant interest in technology. He has ownership of some companies, and he has some great information that he's going to share with us today. So, Mike, before we dive in, let's do the
conflicted question of the day. All right. A 9.2 earthquake hit 2 days ago. That's a little bit of a shake right there. Your home and the homes of all your neighbors were destroyed, but you managed to reclaim your food and water stores, guns and ammo from the destruction. Many friends and neighbors are dead. Your local pastor is asking for help assisting others who weren't prepared, or who were prepared but whose food was destroyed in the earthquake. He is asking all to gather what little they have and bring it to the local church for all to share in order to survive until help is available. He has promised to replenish your supplies from church relief programs when they arrive. He promises you will be blessed if you do so. He hopes relief will be here in 1 week. Do you give up your supplies to help your neighbors and risk your family's ability to survive, or do you bug out and abandon your neighbors? Answers at the end of this video.
You guys better be good Christians when you do this, by the way.
All right, so back to the topic at hand. This episode of Survival Dispatch News is focused on an update with regards to the terrorist threat here in the Homeland. The opening, before we started the video, you saw a sheriff, got his name written down here somewhere, Richard K. Jones from Ohio, had a half-hour press conference last week when he got home from the National Annual Sheriff's Meeting with some pretty scary information, to be quite frank. And we're going to go through the top 5 terrorist threats. We know that we have imminent terrorist attacks coming on the Homeland, and we know that we can thank Obama and Biden for opening up our southern border. And this bullshit where they're trying to say that they need a bill from Congress to shut down the border is just that, complete bullshit, easily verified as bullshit. On the first day of this installed administration, they nuked all of Trump's protections. They remain in Mexico, the progress on building the wall, and multiple other things. So let's keep in mind that Potato Head Biden, which is Obama's puppet, does not need a new bill to accomplish this. So with regards to terrorist cells, we have intel, both open source and otherwise. We're covered up in sleeper cells from Hezbollah, obviously the cartels, the PLA, Boko Haram, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and Lord only knows how many other ones. And I want to make this crystal clear right off the bat. Composition of the panel that you see right now, middle-aged white males, we are not the top threat to America. even though Obama is trying to program people into thinking so. And as Keith will testify to, the feds are telling all of the sheriff's departments and local PDs that white middle-aged white guys are the big threat. And my answer to that is if we were the threat, you would know it. So we're the good guys, not those other shitheads. So let's dive right in with drones as a threat. So we did a video previously. We discussed drones being used to attack open air venues. We had the keyboard commandos came out of the woodwork saying that we were insane. A week later, there was an RFP on sam.gov asking for proposals on EMP weapons to knock drones out because it's a significant threat. The sheriff's meeting last week in DC, they identified drones as the number one threat. I know from firsthand conversations with our military that if our troops encounter drones in the field, they're to throw up smoke bombs and hide. And if that doesn't work, then to try and shoot them down with a 5.56 rifle. Of course, the smoke bombs don't do anything when the drones have thermal. So, Jay, just because this is your first time on, I know you've got a lot of knowledge on drones, and I know that you have a specialized one coming to you. Tell us about that.
I did take my FAA Part 107 for the drone operator license. So I did have that. And when I saw today's topic was drones, I was super excited to talk about a new project that I'm working with. I do a lot with crypto antennas. So we first did 5G antennas, then we did airplane antennas that here in DFW, we monitor all the airplanes and we're selling the data. We're working on now, I just bought what's called like a drone airport, I guess you can call it. It's a pilot program with Walmart. And basically it's for Walmart's drone delivery service. They're going to try to test it out in our little airports that we're putting up. Basically, if there's bad weather, the drone can go into the hangar, sit there, charge or just in between deliveries when it needs a charge. So it's going to be set with charging pads inside of like a hangar. But the best thing about today's topic that we have is there's a large radar that comes with it. I bought all the pieces for the airport. What it does is it does a detection for drones is what I'm seeing. So it does aviation, it does all the different frequencies like UHF, VHF, I think L-band, things like that. And it's a huge radar. I think it looks going to be like 6 feet tall. It ships freight. I should have more knowledge once I get this on how to detect drones and how it's detecting drones. Because even though it's for this project, I still have the data and I still have the programs that'll be around. I have access to all of that. So I'll be able to monitor that myself. So that's why I was excited about today's thing. I don't know how well it's going to be able to detect drones or how it works to detect the drones, but I'll have more information. I think they're shipping the first or second week of March, everything to
This episode of SDN is brought to you by Switch It Up, your national grid down service provider. Get a quote on a solar PV system with battery backup at switchitupinc.com or click the link in the video description below. Mike, let's assume that these types of radars that Jay's mentioning become widespread and we can detect the drones. What's the next step? How do you defend against them?
Well, of course, your best option, as always, would be to just sever the link with the drone to its base. Now, a lot of the commercial drones are going to just automatically fly home. So by sever the link, I'm more along the EMP strike, do a soft strike on one of them as opposed to a hard kinetic strike. Of course, if you can capture somebody else's drone where they have absolutely no control over it, now it becomes an asset to you. You're able to go on ahead and exploit that for any intelligence data, because there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff about where it came from and who runs it and how they run them and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of exploitable material on there. And like I said, now that's a soft kill. Kinetic kill, well, they're down at the lowest common denominator level in Ukraine right now. The Ukrainians are using goose guns. So if you can spot it and he's a low altitude, if it's a low altitude drone, man, it's better than nothing. It's a hell of a lot better than shooting at it with an AK or an M4. I can guarantee you that. These are all options. Drones are a moving target right now. It's honestly, as far as I'm concerned, from the defensive standpoint, it's very much like terrorism, because the technology is moving so incredibly fast that the second that we come up with a countermeasure, somebody's probably already come up with a counter to that countermeasure at some point. So at this point, I don't think that there is such a thing as a definitive answer. If you can track them, that's great. Jay, you were talking about a 5-foot radar?
It's pretty big. It's shipping freight. And I saw a picture of a guy putting one up and it was way bigger than the guy was. So
yeah, you're probably not going to might push to 10,000 feet for where an ISR bird would run.
Right now, my airplane antenna I have up is going from, I'm in Dallas and I'm reaching all the way past Houston and all the way past Tulsa with this antenna. I have a high roof where I'm on a commercial building where I put these antennas at. So I have a line of sight. It's all open. So I have good conditions for that.
Right. So you've got good range. Yeah, we need to talk. No, what I'm talking about is altitude of the drones. Now, granted, FAA is not going to allow commercial drones to fly very high at all, because then you start getting into commercial airspace and everything like that. And the next thing, somebody's 737 just sucked your little pizza delivery drone into its intake, and that's always bad. Apparently, planes fall out of the sky when you do that. Who knew? It's probably the mozzarella, but that's neither here nor there. The biggest thing that always concerns me are the drones that I can't see. That's the shadows at 5,000 going all the way up to God knows. If somebody's actually looking at me with a global hawk or a dark star, what am I going to do about it, right? I might know that a shadow is there. I doubt that I'll know that a predator is there. And that's the 5,000 to 10 or the 4,000 to 10,000 envelope. But it's the little low-lying ones, the poor man's Air Force stuff. Which who is it that just released a book calling drones the poor man's Air Force? Was it NC Scout? Somebody like that?
Mike, for people that think like there's no way that I have to worry about a predator, you do, right? And I'm wearing the appropriate shirt for this today, by the way. There are domestic agencies that have predators. There is incidents, like I teach cops how to do investigations. And part of that, I have a section on ethics. And I talk about things our federal government has done that's unethical as far as getting search warrants that aren't truly authorized by law, but it's called judge shopping. And you go to the judge who's going to sign the warrant. That happens all the time. And they're doing it to cops routinely. Sometimes they're not even writing warrants. They're just getting information without getting a warrant and using against us. If they're going to do it to us, what are they going to do to you? You absolutely do have to worry about this stuff. It is something that you should be thinking about.
Keith, based on your experience, do you have any thoughts on how you defend against this?
So it's funny. I was thinking about how to slide this in. When we have a hostage taker, one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that he can't talk on the phone, and we want to control communication so he can only talk to us. So one of the things we do is we put up a cell phone disruptor, and it kills all and we can direct it. We can make it wide and go everywhere. But usually we just kind of surround the house, and then there ain't a cell phone in the world that's going to work in there. In fact, sometimes it kills ours too, and it kills the neighbors, right? They do it when they follow the president. They use cell phone disruptors so that way bombs don't go off and stuff, right? But I was thinking to myself, they've got to have, I'm sure there is some kind of a disruptor because drones work on a frequency. You just have to disrupt that frequency, right? At least for the poor man's Air Force ones, right? I love that term, by the way. That's so awesome.
It is.
But like, what's the frequency? How do I do that? Is a regular dude. How do I set up that disruption? How do I, like, what kind of antenna do I use? It needs to be omnidirectional. I can't just, because I don't know where it's going to be. I can't sit here and focus on it because I may not be able to see it. But I want to set up like a no-fly zone around my house to make sure, because kinetic is not the way to go. You're not going to do it with your AR, your whatever silly gun somebody's going to pull out for this.
2-gauge punt gun.
My son was in the Middle East and they were having a drone issue. They were getting bombed by drones. And literally the E9 solution was to set up a 240 Bravo on a pintle mount and saying, when you see a drone, start shooting it down. But they're literally surrounded by cities.
Well,
and they're like, well, what's going to happen when my
with
rounds drop down on regular people?
To the man whose only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Right. Well, 240 Bravo, if you've ever used one, that's not really good. Like trying to shoot down a little DJI.
That was his tool. That was the only methodology he knew. Come on. And that's one of the problems with people in the military, especially in big military kind of units, is they've been pushed into that box and shoved into that box and continuously told you can't get out of that box. And then the ones I'm talking about, they can't even think outside of that box. And then they get retards like me that show up, and my entire life is supposed to be outside the box. And needless to say, we don't get along.
Wouldn't it be fun though, having a 240 and try and shoot down shoot down? It'd be fun to try it.
I see the guys in Ukraine and that. I saw one guy launch a net out of a shotgun, but you don't have the distance for that because it's too heavy. It's going to eventually, gravity is going to bring it down. So you get maybe 50 feet, 100 feet out of that. But back to your point with the cell phone disruptor, most of these consumer drones are what DJI is the company that's very famous for making these drones. It's all operated from a cell phone. So if you can kill the operator's cell phone, his drone will basically do a return to home, or it won't know what to do.
So one of the problems with cellular, if it's close enough to a lot of the cellular disruptors are actually incredibly simple because the cellular system is just dumb as a box of rocks. Literally, all you have to do is tell a cellular receiver that you have no signal. And it says, okay, it'll be sitting there with 5 bars and it'll say, nope, I have no signal. I just got told I don't have any signal. So they'll No, I can't take or give any information because that's all you're telling it. But those systems are always pretty low powered and very difficult to transmit that off a Yagi antenna or whatever directional antenna that you're going to wind up using, which it would be if you guys if you can figure it out, hey, good on you. But if you ever think, and this is from experience, if you ever think that you're going to win in a countermeasure battle with a cell tower, you're kidding yourself. We're talking a 45 watt fixed station transmitter, 45 watt plus. You ain't gonna win. It's just not.
You could take that transmitter over though.
If you had access to everything in there, yes.
Well, access just means breaching the door. Like as long as you can, you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying to do anything illegal. But
I see what you're saying. I'm just saying it may be a little bit more complicated than you can always turn the power off.
But I think that it operates on your phone's Wi-Fi. So you don't necessarily need to be connected to your Verizon or your things like that. It's actually pushing out Wi-Fi from your phone to communicate with the drone on 2.4 gigahertz. That's your own phone sending that signal. You don't need the Verizon or your provider to give you that to fly the drone. So I think with taking that, somehow controlling that wave, like interrupting the 2.4 gigahertz somehow would probably disable it.
Well,
on a consumer drone is what I'm talking about, not like commercial.
If you're in a very rural area, there may only be one cell tower that your phone can communicate with, just due to distance. And if you can set up a cell tower spoof where the power of your cell tower spoofer is greater than the 45 watt one but it's 15 miles away, the phone will attach to that tower because it's the strongest, closest signal. Then you can kind of just not send the message on. It's connecting to your little spoofer tower because it's close, but then the message isn't getting in.
And that's just a hostile takeover.
You guys can all read about this, but there's a device called Triggerfish. There's some things that really bother me about it. But one of the things that we do is like, you're looking for a murderer and we know he's in this area. We use Triggerfish and it is a cell phone tower. And I don't like the part where you can see everybody's info, but we can say, all right, there's our suspect. And now we can track them and we can go to them. This technology already exists.
Okay, that's good to know. Jay, quick question for you. Were you suggesting that the phone communicates directly via 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi to the drone, or as opposed to
that's
through
what's
the cell
sending
phone tower?
It's actually, you could just have, I've flown drones that aren't connected to anything, just with an old tablet. Like a lot of guys use a tablet. It's not connected to Verizon. It's not connected to your home network. I've been able to fly the drones with that. But another thing to consider is when I was flying my drone, I could send my drone 5 miles away from me at almost 50 miles per hour. These things can cook across the sky. A consumer drone can just be there in like a minute miles away. So that's another thing to consider. So by the time you've seen the drone, might be too late. Is also to consider that.
Well, and the Ukrainians are using they're using a tactic now where they put one drone up and it relays to all the other drones, so your drone can even go even farther.
Yeah, they're
just doing like a repeater, like a drone repeater.
It's mesh networking.
Jay, I just want to clarify this for our audience. So in the scenario you described where you had an old tablet and a drone, it was strictly Wi-Fi communication directly from the tablet to the drone. Is that correct?
Yes, you'll see your little Wi-Fi icon on your phone or your tablet. You'll see this switch over to the drone. So that's how they're communicating. So it'll go Wi-Fi, and then you'll see your connection drop from, say, your home network, and then boom, you're connected via Wi-Fi to the drone. You can look up your SSID, and that's what you're connected to.
So what kind of distance? Like if the drone is a mile away, like you sent the drone a mile away.
I sent it. I shouldn't say it. After I got my license, I understand this was not really the way you're supposed to fly drones, but I was in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina, just to set this straight. I have sent it over 5 miles and had full control of this drone.
No kidding.
Yes. I could see the video feedback and everything coming from that drone from 5 miles away.
That's interesting. I did not know that. So I'm wondering if that can be utilized with drone swarm technology where this one operator is controlling thousands of drones simultaneously. I don't know if we can answer that question or not, but that's one of the big threats to open air venues here in America is that one guy sends multiple drones into a stadium, for example, and they all drop a payload on the audience, the people there.
Well, they're getting into GPS locking on the drones now. So when there's venues in that, most people, obviously people can hack it and get past it. But the majority of time, like I'm by DFW airport and I used to do drones for real estate photography. So we'd have to put in a request to the airport for the airspace during the time that we were doing the shoot. And then they give us a code, and I'd have to put the code into the app in order to take off. The drone wouldn't take off that close to an airport if you don't have authorization from the airport or wherever you're getting it from.
Okay. Probably safe to assume, though, like you said, anything can be hacked, that the bad guys can probably circumvent that. Anything
Yeah,
traveling over the network.
If you can intentionally snip the physical hardware and stuff out of that, then you don't even have to worry about that.
Okay, well, suffice it to say that drone attacks, whether it's on the homeland or otherwise, is a major concern. Exposed a huge gap in our defense, and that we're not really well prepared to defend against these things. So sweet vindication on our drone video, Mike, that like I said, keyboard commandos saw fit to shit all over.
The best part is
we were right. You were
right.
wrong.
Exactly. And let's face it, nobody cared what they said in the first place. So
there you go.
It's
All
funny.
right.
Who's the expert here? The commenter or the guy that's behind the camera over there?
The commenter, of course. Jeez.
Always. That's Internet Troll 101. Jeff, you're muted.
I was about to say, did you guys ever see the video? I think it was out last week where there was a Ukrainian drone with an RPG round underneath it, and it's chasing this Russian soldier all the way around this burnout tank until it finally drops a payload and whacks the guy. That is something. That is just open the box, strap it to the bottom, fly it in until it goes bang. So simple. And what would that do in a football stadium, high school football stadium? Think of the panic it would cause. Yeah. Just one of those.
When I watched that video, there was a link to another story that described suicide drones. So much like the Japanese kamikazes in World War II, load them up with a payload and crash them into whoever you're trying to attack. Be really difficult to defend against. Let's move on to the next update as far as terrorism in the homeland is concerned, and that's simultaneous attacks on schools. Keith, do you want to speak to that in high level terms?
We've had intel for decades that they were passing down to law enforcement that at some point Iran, if we went to war with Iran, that they were going to turn on Hezbollah sleeper cells within the United States. We know they're here. In fact, I've been talking to a JTTF agent who's going to come on the channel to talk about that specific scenario and the intelligence that they have. We'll have that coming out in coming weeks probably. But in that, we knew that they were going to turn on these sleeper cells, and they were going to have, like, let's say 10 cells. They go to one city, let's say like Des Moines, Iowa, and they do 10 active shooter events. Cops can only go to one. You're going to have one pop up. I'll give an example. We had the church shooting yesterday at Joel Osteen's church. Look how many cops were there for somebody that only the shooter was killed, right? And you had all those that massive response, right? They can't go to all 10. They could probably go 1, 2, but then they're going to get sucked up really quick, okay? And everybody leaves. Now you have 8 surviving cells. Now they go to Fayetteville, North Carolina, go do it again. Then you have 7 surviving cells. Now they go down to Key West, Florida. They go do something else down there. And they just keep going until there's nothing left. But then you have multiple cells all over the country doing that. Think about all that would happen in the United States, all the chaos. People would stop taking their kids to school. So now parents can't go to work, and truck drivers aren't going to deliver food, and like all the secondary effects. And then throw that in with a cyber attack, drone strikes, all the other stuff that could happen.
I think this speaks to Mike's philosophy, which he's mentioned multiple times. Kill one, terrorize many thousands. You don't have to have a super high kill count, right?
That's not me, man. I'm literally quoting the guy, Sun Tzu.
Okay, well, still. You're the messenger then. Jay, do you have any input on simultaneous terrorist attacks happening in, say, smaller locations where they have limited law enforcement?
I just think overall, like when you said in the beginning, the situational awareness, I think a lot of people are not aware of their surroundings. They don't know how to respond to surroundings or to threats like this. So I think a lot now we're putting goggles on our head when we're walking down the street, with the new Apple goggles. So someone comes up, you're wearing a $4,000 goggles on your head. Someone's going to go hit you in the head with a bat and take your $4,000 goggles. That's how blind we are right now. And I think more than anything is our situational awareness while we're out is to have people more aware to identify these threats and say, oh, something doesn't look right. And I think that as a society where we're going, everyone's on their phones, on these goggles, and it's going to cause problems.
We frequently refer to these as weapons of mass distraction. And you see people at gas stations and other places where there's a high probability of being accosted and their face is buried in their phone and they're completely unaware of any of their surroundings. A good point on that, just backing up the drones for a second, that Mike and I had discussed many months ago, was that the incident where the drone flew into the Cleveland Browns football stadium was weeks after the attack on Israel on 10/7. And if those had been paragliders with guys coming in with AK-47s, everybody would have run for their life. They would have recognized the threat. But instead, they all stood around and just looked up at the drone, whether it was the players, the officials, the audience, they all froze. They all did the same thing. So I think you're right. I don't think people fully recognize the level of threat that's posed by things like drones because they're not situationally aware. Suffice it to say, the scenario that Keith has laid out, where you have sleeper cells attacking a dozen places today, 11 tomorrow, 10 the next day, since we only have 3 days worth of food on the shelves, if that manages to disrupt the supply chain and there's no food, look what people do for a TV on Black Friday. Imagine that they have no food for their family. It will be WROL, right? World without rule of law. So let's move on to the third bucket of concern. And this is something that we have not mentioned on Survival Dispatch up until this point in time. And that's attacks on subway stations. And it's happened here with pipe bombs. It's happened overseas, Europe, Japan. And we also have the feds have shared some information on this where they have mocked up attacks on subway stations with chemicals that aren't going to kill you, but so that they could track what the dispersion of them was. And there you go. And you're going to be the first person I go to in a second, Mike. Bottom line is that some of these instances, the bad guys, multiple bad guys, go to a scene like a subway station, break a glass that's full of some sort of either biological or chemical weapon, and it looks iced tea or something like that. It doesn't look anything nefarious. And then when the subway comes in and pressurizes the entire subway station, the dispersion of whatever that chemical or biological weapon is gets massive impact. Mike, share your insight on this topic, please.
So back in the 90s, we did a big exercise in Washington, D.C., and it was during the time period that the Pentagon station was closed down for rebuild. And they actually allowed us to disseminate a couple of mock agents, simulants within that train station, just so we could track everything out and determine what all was going on. It was a great exercise. And then we took all of our findings from that. We ran that as a microcosm of the entire operation, and then the rest of the exercise was essentially tabletop there in DC. And we essentially, as the bad guys, we won that one. We took out about what was it, a full third of DC Metro law enforcement.
Wow.
In what was about 3 hours, something like that, because the Blue Canaries cops,
True.
they kept running in. Now each station lost like 2 firefighters. They went in, didn't come back out, didn't call. All the rest of the firefighters said, "Nope, not this kid. I'm not going in there." This was all in response to the Shinrikyo sarin gas attack in Tokyo,
Okay.
which was very poorly done. They didn't actually understand their agent. A lot of people got dirty, but hardly anybody died in that situation. So this has been a thing going way back. You've got all the big subway and train bombings in Madrid that happened quite a while back. You've got it's a piece of mass transit where a lot of people go, and the security sucks. Why wouldn't you attack there?
Good point. Keith, do you want to speak to this though?
Actually, I want to back up what he's saying about the Blue Canary comment. What's hilarious is they issue us gas masks, and you have 2 filters. You have one for crowd control, and then you have the WMD one is expensive, but the CS one is not. They literally make you keep your WMD one in plastic because they don't ever want to buy you another one again. And one guy actually ripped it out one time for an incident, and they disciplined him because they had to buy a replacement. It's hilarious. I think he's spot on about what's going on with subways are the target that nobody ever thinks about. There is, I won't say where it is, but there's somewhere in the nation, there is a subway system that there is one tunnel, and somebody's figured out that if you go to this one tunnel, you can take out basically the entire subway system. And since 9/11, so however long that's been, they have had a cop assigned 24/7 guarding that one entrance to keep that away. But nobody ever thought about fixing the problem to keep it from destroying the entire, this is a major metro area. Nobody ever thought about fixing it. I've been to that where the cop is part of a SWAT exercise, and I'm like, really? Like, it would be an easy fix. It's going to cost a couple million, but no, man, we're just going to have one cop, not 2, just the one guy that can get executed. Nobody would know. Nobody would ever know. Nobody checks on him. Usually the guy's watching Netflix to guard this one section.
Amazing.
It's horrible.
Before we move on, Jeff, just share your thoughts, because a lot of your career you were overseas, and some of our adversaries you've mentioned have some, let's call it, bad formulas for this stuff like anthrax and whatnot.
Yeah, they do.
Just badass damage.
They did a test. If someone did a line deposition of anthrax at night across Atlanta, it would kill like 100,000 people just from an airplane. You could do it and it's a published report. I'm not letting anything out of the bag here. You could do it with a drone too. And another thing that people don't, Mike hit on it, in a subway attack, they did a simulation, and I think it was either New York or London. It was back in the 70s, and they used an actual bacteria, but one that doesn't hurt anybody. I think it was Bacillus aureus, and it forms spores like anthrax does. So that's why they use it. So it simulates an anthrax attack, dry anthrax, which is sporated anthrax, which is the weaponized version. You release it in one subway station, but when the trains come through, they pump that stuff throughout the entire city. And so you're releasing it in one place, but you release it in Midtown New York, it's going to go uptown, it's going to go into Harlem, it's going to go downtown, it's going to go everywhere because it's real light, it floats, it's fluffy. And where the Ancha and Riccio, they also had anthrax, but they grew up 5,000 gallons, and then they pumped it from the basement of a building they owned to the roof, and they blew it out over the city in this machine. It's basically a giant fan with little nozzles on it, and they called it a water mock, and it just blew all this stuff all over the city. But the Ancha and Riccio had screwed up, and they didn't make their anthrax right. All it did was make a big sloppy mess. I think it killed a couple of dogs and cats.
Yeah.
But when they were pumping it from the basement of this building where these big tanks were, their pipes were leaking. And when the police got there was probably 3 inches of anthrax water on the floor. And the cult members were all wading through it. None of them died. And it's only due to their incompetence that you didn't kill off 500,000 people in Tokyo.
Let's move on to the next topic that's related to the first three. And I'm going to go to you first, Jay, but we've had a ton of warnings lately from multiple levels of law enforcement that our power grid and our networks have been under constant attack for quite some period of time. The Chinese have even gone so far as to say we've penetrated 24 of your most critical networks, and if you push us too far, we'll shut down everything. So imagine that we've got drone attacks happening. We have active killer situations like the one yesterday in Houston. We've got attacks on subways happening, and there's no communication. Like the data network, the cell network, the phone network, everything is down. The TV networks are all down, and there's no communication able to take place. So we're down to kind of bare metal stuff here, where we always recommend to people that they have a backup source of power and some sort of backup comms. So Jay, this is kind of your world. This is your wheelhouse. Give me your comments on what do we do if multiple attacks are occurring and they nuke our communications networks and power grids? What do we do?
First, I just want to say I don't know why any of our power grid would be on the internet. It could be its own network and sustained by itself. I don't know why they choose to have this accessible by the world. It should be locked down. Nobody should be remotely logging into these power systems.
Human nature.
It blows my mind every time they're like, oh, the power grid could be taken over. What do we just have the gas? Wasn't the gas line last year or something like that? It was like half the country took down one of the gas lines.
Colonial pipe.
Why is this publicly on a public network? I don't understand why they do that, and I never will. But the first thing I would do, I have a couple different sources at my home. I have a generator is always my first go-to. That's what I would use first. I would get my batteries charged, everything like that. The problem with the generator, obviously, is you have to change the oil way more than you do with most other machines, because you're running this thing 8 hours, but 24 hours sometimes. And the gas, you're going to run out of gas, oil, and maintenance on the machine and everything like that. So I use it in the beginning, but after that, I'm using solar kind of off grid. I'm not tied into like selling solar back to the grid. What I'm using now is just like 6 panels on my pergola, like my just charging those batteries, and it'll give you a little bit of light. You're not going to be able. The one thing I always tell people with solar is cooking and heating and air conditioning. It's not built for that. You're not going to be able to. You can do it, but it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars in batteries alone. So for those, I would use fire to cook, to heat my home, the little diesel. They have these little diesel, my buddy diesels or whatever they're called, and that'll heat a room for you. So But the other things I would just use it for the batteries to charge my radios, my communications, have light when it's nighttime. Just a little morale just kind of makes you, little things make you happy like that. That's how I would handle it.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Appreciate that. I will say that on a fairly regular basis, we recommend propane generators over gas generators because you don't have to worry about the fuel going stale. You don't have to worry about topping up the octane. So you can stack up tanks just like you can for your grills, which also you can cook with as well. Comms is a really interesting area to discuss because it seems to me that there's a very large percentage, or at least very vocal percentage of people who are into communications that are very zealous over their choice of radios and comms. And if you suggest something that's different from what they believe in and what they use, swords come out and they attack people like Survival Dispatch on a regular basis, but has a great solution he's put in place for his churches. Tell us about the Motorola radios, Keith, and used, and how they're significantly cheaper than buying new equipment.
Many public safety agencies, fire, public works, ambulance, law enforcement, they're switching over to new radios, and they're all selling their old radios online on eBay. So what I bought was a Motorola XTS 5000. I used that for like 10 years on SWAT. I beat the crap out of it. I've fallen in all sorts of bad stuff. I've literally take my vest and throw it off into the corner with the radio and it lands on the radio. You name it, and those things survive. You can buy one for $250 on eBay, and you can buy VHF or UHF. Do not buy the 800 megahertz ones. You don't have a system to support that. But what's good about them, you're getting a battle hardened radio. You're getting something it may have been used for 10 years before, but it's going to last another 10 years on top of that. That radio, let's say I would buy UHF personally, because if you're working a city, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, buy VHF, and then you buy those radios and you buy them for all your friends. So I bought 5 for myself. The church, some of the guys at church use them as well. The best thing about it is you get on the programming software. It's a big steep learning curve on the programming software, but once you learn it, you program it, you can put encrypted channels on there. So our church security team has our FCC license to have all these different channels. We have like 10 different channels. We have 10 channels on the main stack. Then you go to section B, and then now they're all same channels, all encrypted. We can go to encrypted comms, and nobody can hear, like, maybe the government might be able to, but like just your average person isn't going to be able to listen to what you're doing. And it works really well.
What kind of range, Keith?
Oh, so you're looking at line of sight. So you can buy the car version of the radio that's pumping out about 50 to 100 watts. You'll definitely pump that out. I'm running 50 to 100 watts in my garage, and I can talk to everybody in the valley of where I live, in the Treasure Valley outside of Boise, and you can hear everything out there. Portable radio, though, it's going to be line of sight. I've sent my son out and we've tested it. And as long as he's in the neighborhood around here, I can hear it. They're more for, think, tactical communications. Okay. You've got your team, you've been training, and now you have an event and you got to go deal with it. You can go to encrypted comms they even make setups. You can get the Walker Ear Pro that you can turn on and listen. If you don't want to spend the $500 for the used Peltors, right? You can throw, which I would buy those, by the way, if you have the money. Throw those on and you can still talk on it. You go to disco32.com. You can buy the whole link up for it to connect it with your Motorola radio. Whole system costs you a couple $100. But if you've got to go do something tactically, because you've got, let's say, depending on where you live, like I have 5 prisons around me. Wow. Full of murderers, rapists, and bad people. There are people that have plans to go let them out in a grid down so they don't die. And now you've got all those people out here. I can tell you right now, they're good at organizing. The prisoners are. They're good at organizing. They're going to stick together and they're going to take your stuff. You got prisoners. If you live in an urban area, all the gangs, they've just been waiting for that. If you live on the border, sorry, buddy. If you live on the border, you live in a border state with Mexico, the cartels are going to come up here and wreak havoc. They're already here. They're already doing their stuff. So those comms, you're going to need them, and you're going to have to communicate. And
so before we move on, Randy from the channel Not a Rubicon, he's probably like the #1 resource on YouTube when it comes to GMRS radios, but he also is a fan of the Motorola's that you mentioned, Keith. XTL 5000 for vehicles, XTS 5000 handheld that you recommend. And he jokingly said to me, he said, whatever the model number is for Motorola, that's what the original price was.
So that's true. I'm actually, I was just talking to the radio person in my department, talking about this exact thing. The current radios are about 5,000 a piece.
Yeah.
The current Motorola's, and I can't remember what technology it is, but it's super cool stuff. but you don't need that.
This video is going to air on Wednesday, February 14th. So tomorrow, from when this video is on, we have Randy from Not a Rubicon on Survival Dispatch Academy, and he works with a company called Kemp Wireless, KEMP wireless.com, and they're really decent people. They will, apparently how brutal it is navigating the FCC website just for a simple GMRS no license. Multiply that by an order of magnitude to get a business license to get your own channels like you have, Keith, and the business license. So Kemp Wireless will do the application for you with the FCC to get your business license, to get your channels. They'll pre-program everything so you don't have to learn all that stuff. They come with warranty. They're refurbished radios. A little bit more expensive than eBay, but you're guaranteed to know what you get, and you're getting some help from them. So I'll just throw that little thing out there for Kemp Wireless. Mike, you love comms. You use comms on a frequent basis, both in the service and out of the service. Give me your thoughts on what happens. All of this stuff is happening simultaneously. We're being attacked on multiple fronts, and our networks are taken down. What's your go-to? What are your recommendations?
Well, for starters, I would like to call fake news on the whole Mike, you love comm. Okay, Mike hates comms because my comms go down all the time. Anyway, so for you've got your tactical comms, then you've got your regional comms. I need to be able to talk to folks 20, 30, 40 miles away. So that honestly, if you don't mind being out in the open 100%, anybody can listen in, then those 50-watt GMRS systems are the way to go. They're great. There's some good parts that can also go with that. Is you can go, there's a whole lot of stuff I've been reading up on recently that you can go ahead, plug into that thing and start running burst transmissions through that great big sucker. And
so I'm doing that with ham radio right now.
Right.
It works real well.
You can do it with any of these systems. It just takes a little bit more plugging in for one of those big base station sets. But
the benefit of our audience might just give the Cliff Notes version of burst transmission.
So for a burst transmission, I take, say, 10 minutes worth of conversation. I write it all up into a text message, and then I drop it into the app, essentially, that will wind up doing that. And what that will do is it will take all of that data and it will compress it thousands of times, and it'll punch it out as a digital signal. You just have to be on the receiving end awaiting exactly what I've got. You've got to have the same security codes inside your app to be able to basically unwrap that message that I've sent you. Otherwise, if you're working for somebody other than the NSA, it's gonna take you a day or so just to unwrap the fact that I'm reaching out to one of my guys over on the other side of the hill to say, hey, I hope you guys are okay. We're okay. The chickens actually laid 5 eggs today. And do you really want to put all your effort into that? But it allows us to be able to keep contact with each other, and nobody's reading your mail. And at the same time, it dramatically lowers your vulnerability, because there's people cruising around out there that really like direction finding stuff. So if I'm only punching out for an entire message in a second and a half, that's the entirety of my vulnerability right there. A much smaller window for vulnerability, because anything that you do on a radio, period.
You can ambush those people by setting up a fake radio station, lure them in, and then hammer them. If it came to that.
But I'm just saying, having anybody be able to listen to where you are and direction find to where you are, that's where it gets dangerous. That's why for ComSec, the very first rule of ComSec is always use the lowest. Actually, it's a second rule of ComSec. Yeah. The first one is stay away from the push to think button, because it's not a push. It's a push to talk, not push to think. You don't push it and go, stop it. Okay, you're on the air too long. But the second one is always use the absolute lowest power setting that you can possibly get away with.
I have all my ham stuff set up to go on the go. I'll listen from my house, but I won't transmit from my house. And then if I need to do something, I can literally pick it up in a backpack, go to where I need to go, send my message, and then come on back.
That's really smart, Keith. Thanks. Jeff, do you want to weigh in on grid down and networks down due to terrorist threats? Because
the grid, and we're talking about why would you put all that, any access to these power generation systems on the internet? Well, they do it because of SCADA systems, supervisory command and data acquisition systems that they used to run it. In the old days, if you had to throw a switch or reset a breaker, you'd have to send a guy out there to do it. Well, now it's all done electronically. That's why they do it. It's easy, it's convenient. Now, in theory, they're supposed to be encrypted, but encryption's only as good as the people using it. So that's why they can hack into these systems. And All you have to do is open a switch, overload a transformer, something like that. You don't have to go physically go put a bullet in it. All you got to do is overload it. You can do that with a SCADA system. That's why intel agencies love SCADA systems if they can get into them, because you can basically shut a country down with a keyboard.
Right, like sending 700,000 volts down transmission lines that are rated for 200,000 volts.
Or the other one is you do a voltage drop so that you get a brownout and you damage computers because they're getting low voltage. There's all sorts of creative things you can do with electrons. But so until you have a complete standalone system, it's going to be vulnerable. They're always going to be vulnerable.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Number 5 actually is related to some of the stuff that we've already discussed, but we know that the Chinese in particular have targeted our logistics network. So when you get into what are called 3PL, 4PL, 5PL system, so 5PL system, 5-party logistics, this is the automation that occurs. So the grocery store stock of a certain product drops to this threshold. It simultaneously cuts a PO to the manufacturer, cuts a shipping order to the trucking company, and it's all automated. And if you nuke all of that stuff, there's no food being transported to stores, like Keith mentioned earlier. So I don't know that we need to go deep into number 5. Suffice it to say that all of our stuff now being connected by what's called the EDI, electronic document interface, and being able to trigger all this stuff in real time. If you take that out of the equation, there's nothing happening. The supply chain is essentially dead. DRT, dead right there. So I think we've kind of discussed that stuff. So let's talk for the final portion of this episode on what we can do to combat these threats that we're facing. And I'm going to open a can of worms right off the bat by mentioning Eisenhower's Operation Wetback. I didn't make the name up, they did. In 1954 to mass deport 1.3 million people. And when we discussed this offline, Mike, you mentioned this is not the only time that we've had mass deportations. And let's be clear, all you have to do is scroll through X or Twitter for a grand total of 5 minutes, and you will see one video after another of these invaders attacking the weak members of our society and European society. These invaders walking down the street, punching every woman they see in the face, accosting senior citizens, handicapped people. I saw one a few weeks ago where a person with Down syndrome was jumped by half a dozen invaders, had the shit kicked out of them. These chicken shits never do this when there's real men present. But anyway, Mike, talk to me about mass deportations because it's a thing.
And it was a matter of policy, as a matter of fact. The only ones that I've been able to find actual documentation on, I suspect we might have done it at other times, but there's actual documentation that we performed large mass deportations from the Western United States predominantly at the end of the First World War in 1919 and at the end of the Second World War in 1946 to 48. Time period. It's a real thing. It was done. Like it or not, there's historical precedent. And it's not like we're the only country that's ever done this. So there's a lot of countries that do this pretty much on the regular. So, and what it all came down to in each and every case was, hey, we've got a lot of our men coming back from this war, and they're all going to need jobs that are currently being held by people who we told were temps.
So I just, because guaranteed the people who watch this point in the video, there's going to be some bleeding hearts that are going to say we're xenophobic for suggesting this. Let's be clear. So I was young, but I remember when Castro emptied his prisons and jails and sent everybody across here to South Florida. My Uncle Fred lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and I remember seeing the Cubans underneath I-95 all fenced off from the rest of the city. But we've seen reports recently that African countries and Central American and South American countries have been doing the exact same thing. Venezuela amongst them, where they have literally emptied their prisons of all these bad guys. These are people, murderers and violent criminals, and sent them here because of Obama and Joe Biden's policy of opening up our border. These aren't people with good intentions. Watch what the sheriff has to say from Ohio. He flat out says, these people are not here to help us. These people are not here to be kind to anybody. They're on a mission. And these are hardened criminals. Jeff, Keith, Jay, any of you guys want to weigh in on how do we come to grips with this threat? How do we deal with this threat on an individual all the way up to country level. Keith, go ahead.
I just want to say on the law enforcement side, I don't think the public, how much time we spend on dealing with illegal aliens in law enforcement and the crimes they commit and everything else. And there is no support for us whatsoever. None. In fact, it's the opposite. They're making our job so difficult. People are like California. We can't work with ICE. Literally, it's a crime for a cop to work with ICE. That's where we're at this point in America. And as far as like on the national level, there's lots of theories. I know my personal theory is that the Democrats, when they're in power, let all these people come in because they tend to vote Democrat, and it's a way for them to stay in power and make the Republicans become irrelevant.
It's also a way to destroy our culture.
Absolutely.
Which we're seeing happen. Now, if you have an American flag, like the one behind me, you're considered one of the bad guys. You're a terrorist threat because you're patriotic.
And not to get too into the weeds, I got tons of partners that I've worked with over the years that came from Cambodia, Mexico, Vietnam. They were awesome and they're great patriots. They all came here the right way, right? I have family members now that are immigrants. They love America. I don't think at the national level, we know what we need to do. We just don't have the national will to make it happen or the political power to make it happen. So you have to worry about, and what do you do for yourself? I really recommend, obviously you guys know I'm Christian. It's very obvious by my attire and what's in the background. I'm telling you, man, find faith, go to church. There are like-minded people. There are great support mechanisms for stuff, and get into that group. So you're not by yourself. You can't be by yourself. Right? Get together with a group.
How about training, Keith? Because
it's so funny.
Training. What are your thoughts on training?
So training is awesome. I train people constantly. I just had a training session last Saturday on how to deal with suspicious cars. Like, you got a car in your neighborhood. How do you make the approach? How do you talk to the person? How do you deal with it tactically? What if it's innocent? But the government has a bill right now that is trying to outlaw paramilitary organizations. And both you and I did videos on that. My video was on how the government's going to shut down your church security team. And when you read the law, a church security team, which we can all agree, with church security team handled themselves wonderfully yesterday and stopped an active shooter from doing anything. It was the church security team that kept everybody from being harmed. Under this new bill, they would be a paramilitary organization, not allowed to train, not allowed to function together as an organization. And it's funny, everybody agrees with me now because I read the law and said, tell me how this is not, your church security team is not a terrorist organization, right? According to the government. But I still had Christian organizations come out.
Time out. According to the currently installed administration that did not win the 2020 election, is a more accurate description of who's pushing bullshit.
But like, people are coming out saying, oh, you're wrong on that. Literally, the government is trying to keep you because they think you're going to overthrow the government. They're so stressed out about it. Who overthrew the government was Antifa and BLM during 2020. And we're not talking about that, right? Cops were screaming all during 2020. They're overthrowing our country. They tried to take over the White House. They almost got in. And we're worried about everything else. But just prepare for yourself. Get with a group and start training.
You've seen the comments. Anytime you, Mike, Jeff, myself, anytime we say anything with regards to Christianity and white males in particular, then the comments come from below that tell the whole world how racist we are, because
and that's what's wrong with America.
We'd like to,
and that's why we're going to fail.
Man. Yeah,
that's why we're going to fail.
I keep telling them, I am racist. I don't want those Martians here. Take our jobs.
Jeff, and then Jay. Jeff, can you weigh in on this? What do we do? How do we deal with this conundrum that we find ourselves in?
Well, as someone who lives pretty close to the border, you've got to be prepared to defend yourself, defend your neighbors, defend your neighborhood, defend your cities. I live near Tucson's one of those screaming liberals that, hey, we're a sanctuary city, bring them all here. And of course, they're going broke now because of that. But there's a certain point, and it sounds cold, where you got to say, Tucson, you're on your own. I don't live in Tucson proper. If you want to commit suicide, that's on you, but you're not going to take me down with you. And you got to be prepared to defend what you got, because otherwise they'll come and take it.
Good advice. Jay, what are your thoughts on this? How do we deal with, and just so everybody's clear, we're discussing the terrorist threats on the homeland. How do we prepare for that? I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Well, I think what happened in New York when the police were assaulted, I think it was last week, there was a shoplifter that shot at a police officer. This is starting to change people's minds, even in the sanctuary cities. The governor of New York said she wants him put in jail, serve his time, and once he's done, deport him. So even liberal Democrat kind of minds are starting to see that this is not working. It's not sustainable. They don't really have a choice, the government, but to start acting in the interest to protect us, because we're starting to see police get assaulted in Times Square, out of all places. And I just think the government now is starting to take it a little bit more serious, that these are problems, especially those guys got out of jail in 5 minutes, got on a bus and headed off to California. They got caught in Arizona, and I think they're bringing them back or trying them like that.
So not to be a contrarian, Jay, but this current administration has taken an interest in this because it threatens their chances in the 2024 election.
Exactly.
Not because
Exactly.
they give a crap about you or me or anybody else on this panel. So I just want to make sure we put a fine point on that. Joe Biden saying, give me the power so I can protect the border is such a bald-faced lie. Unbelievable.
Look at the finance. They're talking about they're going to start cutting interest rates, and that we had 3 years of horrible. Now it's an election year. You're going to give us a little bit of money to play with so we can be happy again and pretend like everything's perfect, and then reelect them, and we're going to be back in the same thing with a horrible economy.
Or worse. So just to sum up here, the suggestions essentially are vote for politicians who will actually close the border. And we all, like, training is a perishable skill. We all know that. Our audience mostly knows that. So you buy a gun, you go to the range, you dial in the optic, and then you put it in your safe. If you don't use that tool on a frequent basis, you can't expect your performance to be maintained. So you have to train on a regular basis. And that could be everything from hand-to-hand combat through to weapons and everything in between. Increase your situational awareness. We have discussed this to death, especially with Don Mann, and it's not that hard. There's more to it than having your head on a swivel, but when you go somewhere in public, sit with your back against the wall with a purview of the entire area so you can see who's coming in and out. Don't get buried in your phone. Pay attention. It's that easy. And the other one, of course, is stacking up preps. Make sure that you have alternate power source. You've got plenty of food and water. You've got ammunition stored. Did I miss anything before we go to the conflicted question?
Yes, I think a lot of channels are mentioning this right now, and I'm guilty of this one. Is I'm not in my perfect health. I need to work out a little bit better. And that's all together. If you're in a bad situation, just your body is healthier, you're able to work harder and like that. I think focusing on our health, and that's something you can do for free. I'll go do some burpees in front of your TV, some push-ups. And like I said, I'm guilty of it. I've gotten a little bit weak laying around the couch, but I think that's the one thing we can do for free right now. We can start that.
Like,
It's free till you turn 40, man.
I'm almost 50, so I'm starting to feel it.
well, it gets worse at 50. Let me just be clear on this. I just joined AARP last week. I turned 55 last week. I now get seniors discounts on everything.
So old.
Well, you and Keith are going to be joining me here very shortly. And Jeff,
I'm not 55.
I'm already there, man. I'm 63 next month.
Woo, man.
That's too funny.
They're going to put you on a terrorist watch list now.
Absolutely.
Let's hear the question again.
Well, I did want to throw in real fast 2 preps that I would suggest for, and I'm the guy that always screams this stuff, but there's a couple of preps that are ignored a lot of the time, not just health. Couple of real good preps that a lot of people just are constantly paying attention to. One, and this is probably one of the most necessary ones, and a lot of people in our comment section clearly miss this prep. Get yourself a sense of humor. Oh no, but seriously, if you've ever been, and Keith knows exactly what I'm talking about, man, you're out in the field, everything sucks. You're muddy, you're cold, everything sucks. But there's always that one guy who can always crack a joke and lift everybody's spirits. Is a huge skill. Work on your sense of humor, because sense of humor will keep you from going insane, right? And or doing things that you're not supposed to do, and winding up war crimes, all that stuff. But and then the next thing, and this is the one that I do talk about all the time: organize. You have people around. You need to form a community. If you haven't done that yet, get on it. Even if it's just with your neighbor, find someone reliable that you can rely upon. And that's it. I'm off my soapbox.
All right, fair enough. Let's do the conflicted question here.
Okay, conflicted question of the day yet again. All right, prepare yourselves. A 9.2 earthquake hit 2 days ago. Your home and the homes of all your neighbors were destroyed, but you managed to reclaim your food and water storage, guns and ammo from the destruction. Many friends and neighbors are dead. Your local pastor is asking for help to assist others who were prepared, but whose food was destroyed in the earthquake. He is asking all to gather what little they have and bring it to the local church for all to share in order to survive until help is available. He has promised to replenish your supplies from church relief programs when they arrive. He promises you will be blessed if you do so. He hopes relief will be here in 1 week. Do you give up your supplies to help your neighbors and risk your family's ability to survive? Or do you bug out and abandon your neighbors? What do you do, hotshot?
Keith, you go first.
Oh, yeah. This is a great one. All right. So you've heard me talk before. Number one, I keep telling churches, what are you doing to prepare? Because I keep telling people that when things go south, everybody shows up to the church for help. The churches need to be preparing. Number two, though, I've been saying this repeatedly. I have charity food. So I have preps for my entire family, 10 to 20% set aside, give away to help other people, because that's what you should be doing. Just because it's the end of the world doesn't mean you lose your humanity, right? And you still have to be a good person, right? We live in America. This is a great country. Don't help destroy it. I would take the charity preps that I have and go over to the church and drop it off. And then tell them, don't worry about giving me food back. I'll deal with it when everything stops. Be about to remember, 9.2 is ginormous. Okay. But we all recover. That is a regional catastrophe, not a national one. So the rest of the country should, just like past, I was at Loma Prieta when we had the 7.2, we had multiple people dead. I was working then. That is something we will recover from fairly quickly. Okay. With that said, go make sure you have prep set aside. And I would go take over, because I may be different than the rest of you, but I have stuff set aside for this. I'm going to go drop it off, and then I'm going to go help people at the church. I'm going to help my neighbors while I still protect my family.
I don't know why Mike always talks shit about you before you come on here, Keith, but you're all right. But by my end, you're good.
I say the exact same things to his face. We used to be in the same unit. Of course, I have to talk
I know,
crap about
right?
it.
Jay, let's
the
get your
rules.
answer, Jay.
Mine's very similar. Over the years of prepping, I've kind of upgraded from the spam to freeze-dried foods, and I would always have something extra to give to my church. That I was, like he said, I just have a percentage of it that I'm ready to give to my neighbors, ready to give to people that are willing to help out in this situation. So I would not give it all. That I just wouldn't. I would. Obviously, I'm looking out for myself right now and put away a little percentage for me, but I would definitely do my best to help the church out.
Right on. Thanks, Jay. Mike, you want to go?
I suppose I'm with these guys. I have specifically built in a quantity specifically for charity, but also knowing that this is going to require a little bit more than what I have in my charity. Would I take an additional 10%, maybe 20% out of the stores that I have? Probably. I think I'd be willing to push forward some of that, because I'm not on a razor's edge at this moment anyway. I could probably move some of that lowest common denominator food over for that. And then, yes, just like Keith said, and now stay and do something more than donate, put your back into it.
I would expand on Keith's point with regards to this being a regional disaster, which means help is on the way. I would hope anybody who's focused on prepping has more than a week's worth of food for themselves and their family. If we have, let's say, 2 years worth of food stacked up, we're absolutely going to share it, because it's probably less than a week before the cavalry arrives and helps us, because it's a regional catastrophe. So I don't foresee it's not even a question. We have enough on hand to feed our family for many months, years. We would absolutely share it. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I don't think we would run out. That's the whole point, is regional. Can't foresee us running out. We seem to have lost Jeff because he has a construction going on at his place, but appreciate everybody on the panel again today. Don't forget to go to Christian Warrior Training, sign up for Keith's channel, go to his website, christianwarriortraining.com. Sign up for his email as well. There's a ton of great information there, and we'll see you all again in a couple more days. Oh, time out. Jeff is back. Go ahead. And
they framed my garage wrong, so we had to go fix it. On the conflicted question, I just pretty much agree with everybody else. You set aside some food for charity and you give that to them. Would I give them all of my food, all of my water, and all of my guns and ammo? No, I'd keep some to protect myself and my family. But I would want to give as much as I thought I could reasonably spare to give to everybody else.
Thanks again, y'all. We'll see you soon.
This video is sponsored by William Tell Archery Supplies, home of the Mini Striker Crossbow. Click the link in the description below to learn more.